guys, how's it going? It's been a hot minute. It's been quite a while, and we're coming back. We're not even doing cosplay content today. I'm just doing general sewing stuff. I've actually kind of, the past year and a half, 2 years, kind of fallen out of love with cosplay. And I thought for a little bit that maybe it was I had fallen out of love with sewing, but I kind of am coming to the realization that that's not the case. I'm not quitting cosplay, but I will say I have felt a lot of, like, what's the word I'm looking for? I've had issues with endurance when it comes to creative endeavors, I think is the best way to kind of like put it. Any project that's taking me longer than I expected or that ends up being harder than I've expected, I've kind of just put it to the side. I started a Victorian gown. It's in one of these boxes that just never got finished. I started Yodo Garon, which I don't know if it's going to get finished. I kind of, like, earlier this week had this huge realization of, like, I am so unhappy with this. I don't want to work on this anymore or like look at it, and I initially was like, I'm gonna throw everything out. I realized that was like a super impulsive decision and I just need to take a break from it. I think a lot of this is coming from the fact that I haven't finished a costume since October of 2022, and a costume that I did finish, I now have some negative emotions associated with. Don't really want to get into that right now. And with, you know, I traveled to Virginia for 6 months for work, and then I got back and had a lot of life stuff going on and just really haven't gotten to engage in my hobby in not just like a healthy way, but just really any way. It feels like every step that I've tried to take to get back into it, I'm just faced with some sort of like barrier or boundary that I just physically or mentally just can't break through. It's not physically, it's all mental, it's all in my head. We're taking a little bit of a break from cosplay, not super long, maybe just a couple of weeks. And instead I'm gonna focus on 2 different projects for me and only me. Today we are making this simplicity pattern. I'm super excited about it. It's S9850. I actually was looking for a jumpsuit pattern to replicate. I just fell in love with this like lingerie, bustier inspired top here. So my plan is to actually do more of a sundress situation than like this formal dress. I'm gonna keep the top the same. We're going to do some thicker spaghetti straps up top, and then instead of this like T-length dress, we're going to have it hit just above the knee, probably about 18-20 inches total in length for the skirt. And I'm using this gray and black striped cotton that I got from the Halloween collection at Joann's, and then just like a black cotton for lining. Super cheap. I say, you know what? I say cheap. Sewing is never cheap. People like to talk about, oh, you know, sew your own clothes, it's so cheap. No, it's not. This cost me $60. Literally $60. The pattern was like $5. I got it on sale, and I got the PDF version of the pattern. I've never put together a simplicity PDF pattern before. And generally, if I'm being really honest at this point, I've kind of decided I hate PDF patterns. I think if I get a PDF pattern, I'm just gonna stick to indie small designers. But I've got all the pieces already cut out for my size and my cup size, because for this pattern, it does call out specifically, you look for your underbust, which will get you a certain size, like small, medium, large. And then within there, they have different sizes based off of your cup size, which you take from doing your underbust, subtracted from the full part of your bust. I think that a design like this definitely requires that level of detail. I probably not gonna make a mock-up. It's not really what I do typically. I did go up a size from what I usually do, which is standard for me with these commercial patterns. It's easier to take something in than it is to let it out. And yeah, so we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna get started here. And just like that, all of my pattern pieces are cut out. So the way that I like to organize my pattern pieces, especially for things that have a bunch of different pieces that have to go together in a specific way, is basically like this. I mean, I keep the pattern number with the piece, lay them all out, and this is just them all together on one side. I'll then take, you know, this, and I'll separate out my left side from my right side, and I'll keep them all laid out. I have enough space to do this. If you don't, then probably recommend doing it a little bit differently. I don't really know what to tell you, but this works really well for me, dog. I'm gonna be flatlining all of these pieces. I've got them all put together. These are all laid out so that they're all paired and in the right order. I'm gonna take these all and I'm going to iron them. For some reason, it just makes me feel better. I feel like it lets me really make sure everything is super flat. This has already been washed and ironed. So I'm gonna do that before I take it over to my machine to do some basting stitches. But a little thing that I got is actually this little like foot button for my iron, and it's super handy because all of my irons that I've ever had have always had like an auto off feature. In the past, my old iron, it was one of those ones where I could like tip it and that would be enough to turn it on. This one does not do that, and it's really frustrating, especially on long days of sewing. And here in this apartment, I have a hard time reaching this outlet. Like, it's just a pain in the ass to have to go and reach behind. So anyway, I have this nice little foot button, so that way if I need to, I can just come over, step on it to turn my iron on. Super handy, definitely recommend. I think it was like 12 bucks on Amazon, and if that's something that you have an issue with, totally advise getting one. Once all of my pieces were ironed and still kept together, I took them over to my sewing machine and I began basting around all of the edges. The benefits of something like flatlining is that you can take a piece of fabric that maybe doesn't have a lot of body or structure, and you can combine it with a piece of fabric that has a lot more body and structure, or of the same fabric, and it's going to give you just more body and structure. How many times can I say that in one video? I don't know. I also want to go ahead and apologize in advance. Some of these camera angles are a little weird and don't really do a good job of showing what I'm actually doing. This is a learning experience for me. This is a new way of filming stuff, and frankly, it's been a really long time since I've filmed anything, so it's gonna be a little wonky until I get it situated. Once I had every piece flatlined, I was then able to actually start the actual construction of the bodice. The thing about sewing is that most of it's prep work. There's very little actual sewing of two different pieces of fabric together to like make a seam. It's just ironing and cutting out pattern pieces and cutting out fabric and making sure you have everything the right way, and then finally you get to sit down at the sewing machine and get to work. This pattern has a 1/4 inch seam allowance, which is pretty small. That's typically what I do my basting stitches for something like flatlining at. So in the finished product, you will see some basting stitches that are visible. Not really an issue. You can always go through and remove those by hand. It's not the end of the world. And I even left some in because they're on the inside, and who fucking cares? Not me. All of my pieces, well, most of them, I don't have the tops of the cups put on yet. I'll explain that in a second, are together. And you're probably wondering why the hell are my seams on the outside. The reason is that instead of doing a bag lining like what this pattern seems to call for, I'm just flat lining all of these. So that way, instead of having to make basically 2 garments and then have the lining and the outer fabric facing each other, I am just flat lining these, putting the seams on the outside, and then the seams will be covered with this black bias tape, which I'm going to use for my boning channels. It helps for a couple of reasons. The big thing is, like, as you can see, these stripes don't line up perfectly. If I were to just have these seams without the boning channels and with the boning inside between the outer and the inner liner fabric, like the pattern calls for, you would just be able to tell. Pattern matching, especially for something like this, is such a pain in the ass, and so instead of taking the time to do that, I was like, you know what? Let's just add some big, bold black lines and some boning on the outside, and that should hide all of my mistakes. So my next step is going to be putting all of this bias tape along these seams. The reason that I didn't put the top part on this cup yet, if you haven't figured it out, is that way I can do this bias tape over this center seam to keep the seam on the inside from being on the inside. And then I'll apply the top part, and we'll do another piece of bias tape along that seam. One of my really bad habits when it comes to something like bias tape to cover up boning channels is I play this game so fast and so loose. I don't know if you can see here, there are barely any pins holding this stuff down. I basically pinned the start and the stop of each channel and just kind of went for it. I have gotten pretty proficient with sewing like this over the course of about 10 years now, which is absolutely wild to say. Oh my god, I've been sewing and making costumes for a decade. Ooh. I kind of hate that. So I recommend maybe using more pins, but if you're a wild child and you feel like it, just full send it. Part of the fun of sewing, especially with something like cotton, is you can make so many mistakes and you can all take them out and put them back in, do what you want. It's all fine. There are really no actual rules. Just have fun and be creative, and for God's sake, make some fucking art. So I think this is about as far as I'm going to get tonight. I went and pinned all of the boning channels on, and then I sewed them on, and as you can see, it is so much harder to tell that patterns don't match up now. So one thing that I did with this pattern fabric, I don't think I talked about it before, is once again, because pattern matching kind of really sucks. And when you have things like this, where a pattern is all going potentially one way, if something's a little bit off, you'll kind of get this frumpy look. I learned this years ago when I tried making a plaid dress with princess seams and realized that without any delineation between where the patterns were a little bit different, it looked really bad. Like, it fit me well, but the general appearance was poor. To help break this pattern up a little bit, this like vertical stripe, I did these horizontally, and I think it looks pretty good. I will say overall, this design has a little bit of a touch of like, was it 2013, 2014, when like this style of, usually it was a floral with like the black boning channels was so popular. I'll go through probably tomorrow and pick out all of my basting stitches, but I have to go eat dinner, so goodbye. It is now, let's see, 7:25. Probably gonna stop at about 8 or 8:30. I had more time after I ate dinner than I had expected, so I went ahead and I put the cups on, same method as before, putting the seam on the outside of the fabric and then stitching this binding on top. Also, I added like a weird little dart to the cups because they just ended up a little bit too big. I probably could have gone with my actual cup size instead of what it said on the pattern. It's not the end of the world. I personally prefer a larger cup in general for a little bit more coverage, so it's fine. Another thing that I added was a center bone down the front just for a little bit more stability. Anyway, long story short, my thought is that I'm probably gonna bind this whole top edge in bias tape. Might as well finish off this sort of like cartoony Tim Burton-y line situation we have going on. But right now, I'm actually going to go ahead and add all of my bones to my boning channels. For all the bones that go into the boning channel, I went ahead and I cut them out about a 1/4 inch shorter on each side, so top and bottom, than the actual channels themselves, just because I needed seam allowance and I knew I was going to add bias binding later and then a skirt, etc., etc. And then I rounded the edges. Like you just saw, I basically cut it flat, and then I do 2 45s, and I take this, I think is 100 grit sandpaper. I say sandpaper, it's a sanding sponge. Same difference, it doesn't really matter. And I'm just sanding these smooth. The reason I'm sanding them smooth versus just leaving them flat is that if you have sharp edges on your plastic or metal bones, dear Lord, oh my God, sharp edges on your metal bones sounds so dangerous, but it can poke through your fabric and it can ruin the garment that you have spent so much time making. So definitely round the tips of your bones, apply the caps to your spiral steel if you have it, and whatever else. Just make sure that you do the steps necessary to make sure that your garment lasts as long as it possibly can. Okay, so this is what we have so far, and I have a couple of, I don't know if concerns is the right word, I think just general comments. Number one, this extends really far into my armpits, so I definitely want to trim that down. And just kind of bring it all down and probably put a strap like here instead of all the way over. And then number two, as you can see when I turned around, she a little tight, mainly just right through here. But overall, I like it. I think it's really cute. I think this will be a successful little make. Other idea that I'm playing around with is like, making stuff for myself right now is hard. And the big reason that it's hard, and part of why I think I've struggled a lot with cosplay recently, is because cutting and bulk cycles with fitness, and like I'm gaining weight and then I'm losing it, and none of the costumes that I have fit. None of them. They're all a little too small. And because of the way my body is changing from all the muscle mass that I'm adding and have been adding, that's just kind of how it's going to be. So I think actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this into like a lace-up style dress, so that way as I grow and shrink or whatever, like it can adjust with me. I think that's the play. I think that way I can enjoy this the most. Yeah, so I think what I'll do instead is I'll just take these back panels and I'll just fold them in half and do some boning. And then I think I might do actually just like some little loops to run the lacing through. Instead of like installing eyelets and everything like that, we'll just do like little fabric loops. Okay, it is now day 2 of working on this dress, and my plan today is to do the skirt. My idea for this skirt is basically a 3-tiered ruffle skirt. So we have, my waist is about 30 inches. I'm gonna double that. When I do ruffles, I tend to like at least double them at the minimum. I feel like anything less than that, you're kind of risking a lot of loss of volume and it just doesn't give a very good poof. So first tier will be 60 inches gathered to 30, which second will be like 120, and then the third will be maybe not 240. I want it to be, we'll do 20 inches long, so I want them to be equal lengths. 20 divided by 3 is 6 point something. I want to say it's actually like 6.66. Continuing, I haven't done the math, that's just quick off the top of my head. And I gotta add seam allowance, so probably honestly just 7.25 inch. The bodice, as the instructions stated, only had a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I might have not mentioned that earlier, so I apologize. And I did go ahead yesterday, and once I tried the bodice on and I saw that it was going to be a little too small, I went ahead and folded those edges over to get them ready for adding lacing loops, because we're gonna do loops instead of eyelets, because I think that'll look nicer. So I actually really lucked out with the way that I did this ruffle skirt. Because my fabric was 45 inches across and the selvage was also printed, I could utilize the selvage as basically the clean seams for each panel that went together, and didn't have to worry about that fraying too much. So the first layer ended up being, oh, this is gonna get so ridiculous sounding, 1.5 45 inch lengths sewn together. That's 60 inches gathered down to 30. The second layer ended up being 3 45 lengths gathered down to 30, and the third layer ended up being 6 45 inch lengths gathered down to 60 inches. So what you're seeing me do here is something that I actually was taught when I worked at a fabric store in high school, which is, if you have a fabric like cotton, oh my god, please, dear Lord, test this out on a tiny, tiny, tiny little piece of your fabric before you ruin it. But if you have a fabric like cotton where there's like a definitive grain line, you can do a little tiny snip and grip it and rip it, and you'll actually get basically a clean cut all the way across, or I guess I should say a clean tear all the way across. So that's what I did to save myself the time and agony of having to sit down and measure and mark and then cut these 6-inch strips, I guess I should say 7.25 inch strips out. I just kind of did a little small snip and then ripped it, and it was so fast and so convenient. This is also a really great way if you're needing to cut like a really long skirt panel on grain, to get your fabric grained up. Always iron after this though. I can't once again stress how important ironing is for any step of any project. If you're doing a seam, if you're working with a fabric that could crease, just iron it. Dear Lord. Save yourself the headache later. Get the iron out. Make it work. So way back in my day when I first learned how to sew, I became obsessed with Lolita and Lolita dresses. And if you know anything about Lolita or Lolita dresses, especially the cupcake-shaped skirts that they wear, there's a lot of gathering. I typically would do 3 times my waist measurement when I was making a Lolita gown. And one thing that I had to get really good at really fast was ruffles. So, quick tips. Longest stitch length you possibly can, highest tension you absolutely possibly can do on your sewing machine. Do 2 or 3 lines of ruffles, don't ever do just one. One line, number 1, prone to snapping. Number 2, looks really slappy. So do 2 lines, and then you take the top threads of your lines that you just stitched and you hold them taut and you use those to start ruffle. You can see me here gathering and kind of pushing and working the fabric down these lines that I've stitched. This is the best way to do ruffles. You get so much control over the volume, the amount of fabric that you have, where it's placed, and it's great. If that is the one tip that you take out of my video, I want it to be how to do ruffles well. Please, dear God. Don't get me wrong, a ruffling foot is incredibly handy, and if you need to get something done quick and you don't really care, or like you already know how your ruffle foot's gonna happen and work for you, go for it. I am not ruffle shaming here. I just want to share with people what I have discovered and what I do, and you're here on my channel watching my videos, so obviously you kind of care about my opinion, like at least a little bit, so there you go, a little penny for your thoughts. Anyway, so I took my second layer and pinned it to the first. I would put the middle pin, and then I would do it on the edges, and then I would take those top threads like I mentioned and just work the fabric down until it was pretty evenly gathered. I have thoughts. I think the idea is cute. I think we're getting somewhere. I think the skirt is too long. I'm trying to decide if I want to just like take like 2.5 inches off this bottom layer, keep the 3-tier look, and then I'm not wasting all the time that I've spent like ruffling this, or if I want to take all the layers apart and like make them equidistant again.
I think that'd be too much work. I think we should just stick with like 2.5 inches off the bottom. Like we're, I don't know, man. It's a little too much, you know. There is a lot of twirl here, which is great. That's what I wanted, but it's just too much. It's too much, and it's not quite the look that I was going for. Okay, so I took that little bit of length off, and like immediately I feel a lot better about it. I just think this is a lot more flattering length. So I think my next steps are going to be, and you're probably wondering why I didn't do this before I attached the skirt to the bodice. I'm going to put bias all on these seams just to keep this theme of like these big thick black lines going. We're going to do it on the waist and then on the 2 tiers. I have no answer. I have literally no answer for why I didn't do this before, except that I forgot and I'm dumb, and sometimes these things happen. I'm not a professional seamstress. I make it up as I go. You should too. Okay, so remember how I was talking about I was going to turn this into a corset back? My initial idea was to take the same fabric that I had ripped off the bottom of this hem and then turn it into loops, kind of like this. But when I started doing that, the fabric did not want to turn. My seams were very, very, very small. I did not like. So I got really frustrated and I was like, well, fuck. I know this won't fit with a zipper, so what are we going to do? Move, Izzy, thank you. I went on Amazon and I found these, which are conversion kits for turning a dress that has a zipper that doesn't fit into a corset lacing. They weren't super expensive. I think it was like 15 bucks. So total, that brings this project to like $75 and about a week of work. I say a week of work. I worked on it Thursday and Friday of last week, and then I think basically haven't touched it since then. I'm gonna go ahead and pin these in and we're going to sew them in. And once they're sewn, I'm gonna lace it up, try it all on, and I have some straps that I made over here from the fabric to add onto the bodice, and then we should be good. I don't think I'm going to hem this. The reason that I'm not going to hem this, when you tear fabric like this, you're tearing it on the grain, and it really doesn't fray a whole lot, and I'm lazy. So if I wear this a couple of times and wash it and find that it is fraying more and more, I'll take some double fold bias tape and add it down here. But for now, I kind of like this unfinished look. I think it's pretty cute, and it adds to the sort of like Beetlejuicy kind of Tim Burton vibes, because we've somehow gone there. Also, look at my nails. They're also Beetlejuice themed. None of this was intentional. I just got this fabric and I liked it, and the movie was good. I have virtually nothing of note or importance to add here, but it feels icky leaving a video without a voiceover or some sort of talking. So yeah, I just pinned this in and I stitched it in. I did 2 rows of stitching on each side. I also added in a modesty panel that I made way too wide and a little bit too long, like 4 inches too long, and then I had to take it apart and turn the edges and make it less long. But it worked out because things do work out, because I am perfect and I'm lucky and things always work out for me. At least that's what I try to tell myself every single day. There's a lot going on right there. I've got it marked out on the strap. I just tried it on and pulled it until I felt like it looked and fit good. I have to measure it out to make it equal on the other side. I think this is a cute little number. I think we're doing good. Hell yeah, buddy. I put socks on because people on the internet are freaking weird. But this is her. This is the dress. Is she perfect? Oh god, no. Absolutely not. There are a lot of things that could have been done differently. Look at the inside here. Like, I could have put these seams on the outside to cover them with this bias tape, and they wouldn't have been visible at all. My modesty panel, a little too long, and also way too wide at the bottom, but that's okay. God. The inside of the bodice, you can see I left all of my basting stitches in, and I didn't add any interfacing to these cups. The pattern didn't call for it, but when I put the cups on, they didn't stand exactly how I wanted them to against my body, so I took some old bra pads and sewed this in by hand. And there's also a visible stitch on the outside. These straps I left way too long, and I probably will leave them long. My shoulders and my traps grow for some reason exponentially compared to the rest of my body, and I would like to be able to adjust them. Things aren't perfectly symmetrical, stuff isn't perfectly even. I'm leaving this hem raw because I want to, I like the look. And like overall, back here looks a little sloppy, but that's okay. I don't care too much right now. If I'm being so honest with you, I kind of want to cry. This is the first thing that I have like sewn and actually finished in like 2 years, which is really weird to say. Cosplay was such a big part of my life for so long, and
it hasn't been for a while. 'Cause life gets like that. And I really thought that I had lost my love, or really frankly, my ability to make anything. And it feels really good to know that that's not gone. Yeah. I'm really excited. I'm really happy. I think this has turned out super cute, and I think I'll wear it a few times. Honestly, this was less about making a wearable piece and more about just finishing literally anything at all.